Hi everyone, and welcome to The Sleepy Scientist. I'm really happy you're here. Tonight, we're going to go on a calm and quiet trip to learn something amazing. So get comfy, take a deep breath, and let's enjoy this peaceful science story together. Before we start, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from and what time is it for you right now? If you like relaxing science videos, don't forget to tap the like button. Now let's begin.
Imagine a world where the sky sits still, where winds whisper in soft hisses and time itself seems locked beneath glass. In this frozen world, vast and white, glaciers lie like sleeping giants, unmoved by centuries. They stretch across mountaintops, down into deep valleys, blanketing the land in a silence so complete, it becomes a sound of its own. These glaciers are not just frozen water. They are archives of Earth's memory. Every flake of snow that once fell from ancient skis has been pressed and compacted over time, layered year by year into a crystalline scroll of the planet's past. Beneath their surface lies a story written in ice. There are air bubbles trapped from centuries ago, whispers of atmospheres long vanished. There are dust grains that once danced in deserts, ash specks from distant volcanoes, pollen from forgotten forests. Every layer is a page, every crack a crease of something once living. And yet the glacier does not speak in words. It breathes in silence, storing secrets in stillness. The deeper the ice, the older the memory. Miles beneath the surface, light cannot reach, and warmth is only a distant dream. But the ice remains, dreaming, holding, remembering. Scientists, like quiet visitors to a sleeping library, drill down into these glacial cores and pull up time itself. In their hands, they hold tubes of frozen past, samples that speak of changing climates, vanishing species, and shifting winds. A slight variation in trapped carbon tells of forest fires. A fine black line may hint at the soot of an industrial world. There is no shouting in these records, only soft murmurs. And it is in these murmurs that we learn who we were. But glaciers do more than remember. They shape the world. Slowly, endlessly, they carve through stone like water carving wood, turning hard landscapes into softened valleys. They grind mountains into sand, sculpting Earth's bones into curves. They leave behind moraines and fjords, glacial lakes that shimmer like forgotten tears. And when they retreat, they reveal a land altered, different from before, like a person who has lived through loss. In some corners of the Earth, glaciers are still growing, inching forward with the patience of centuries. But in most places, they are melting, not in a rush, but in a slow sigh, a breath let out after thousands of years. As they shrink, their memories begin to bleed into rivers, mixing the ancient with the now. And with their melt, we lose the silence, the archive, the stillness. Ice that took millennia to form becomes water in days, lost to the oceans, unremembered. Standing before a glacier is like standing before time. You can almost hear it, the groan of ice shifting deep within, the low hum of tension between weight and gravity. Some glaciers crack loudly, with sudden thunder that echoes across mountains. Others simply melt in silence, drop by drop, their stories falling away. There is sadness in this melting, but also a strange peace, a release, as though the glacier, tired of holding so much, finally lets go. The people who live near glaciers, shepherds, mountaineers, scientists, often speak of them like spirits. They change moods. They breathe. They retreat when watched and advance when forgotten. In myths, glaciers are sacred. In truth, they are sacred still. Not just ice, but memory, motion, and mystery. And so we stand at the edge, watching them melt, not just as onlookers, but as part of the story. The glacier is not separate from us. Its water flows into our rivers, its memory shapes our knowledge, its melt mirrors our warming world. What it remembers, we must learn to remember too, not with fear, but with quiet respect. Because when the ice finally disappears, the silence it held may never return. Let's drift deeper beneath the visible ice into the dense heart of the glacier where light has never lived. Here, pressure reigns like an ancient king. The weight of centuries above squeezes every drop of air from the snow, turning soft crystals into dense, translucent blue ice. It glows faintly in the drill light, but it has never seen the sun. This deep ice is older than memory, older than names, older than our oldest stories. And still it remains, listening, holding, waiting. Within these silent layers are chemical codes. Scientists call them isotopes, tiny atomic fingerprints that tell us how warm the world was when the snow first fell. A heavier form of oxygen might mean the air was cooler. A shift in ratios suggests ancient rain patterns, even how strong the sun's breath was. It's like reading a poem written in atoms, where each stanza is a storm, a season, a breath of history. And just as our minds can recall the way a loved one's voice sounded long after they've gone, the glacier holds the echoes of skis that once burned bright or sagged heavy with ash. These frozen memories are delicate. One wrong touch, too much warmth, and they vanish. That's why researchers carry them in sealed chambers, their breath held, as if afraid to disturb the past. And when they finally open the cores in clean, cold labs, the ice speaks in vapor, sighing out secrets that have waited 10,000 years to be heard. A drop of melt might contain bacteria that last stirred in prehistoric puddles. A cloud of air might contain the breath of a woolly mammoth, or the sigh of trees that no longer stand. But glaciers do more than archive. They act. With the weight of time behind them, they move slowly, yes, but with unstoppable force. A glacier does not rush. It presses forward inch by inch, pulling rocks, grinding them down, smoothing landscapes that once stood jagged and wild. Where it goes, it leaves grooves in bedrock, deep scars that say, "I was here." And when it pulls back, it leaves valleys and pools, rich soil and standing stones, as though reshaping the land was never destruction but quiet creation. You can almost feel it if you close your eyes. The slow movement of ice over stone, the grinding sigh, the deep patience. It's not violent, not loud, just deliberate. And yet this slow dance of glacier and ground changes everything. It alters rivers, bends mountains, builds lakes, even shifts coastlines. And all the while it remembers. Like the mind recalling in sleep, the glacier flows and dreams and shifts, making room for something new while holding onto what once was. In this way, glaciers mirror us. We too carry old memories beneath our surface, buried deep where no light reaches. Memories that shape our actions even if we don't see them. Grief we thought we forgot. Joy that still lives in the muscles. Names we haven't spoken aloud in years. And like the glacier, we are shaped by the weight we carry. We move slower with certain memories, heavier with others. And when we finally let go, it's not an erasure, it's a transformation. There is something humbling in knowing that glaciers have lived longer than our stories and will, for a while, outlast most of our monuments. But now, even they are changing. Climate shifts pull at their edges. Once stable tongues of ice are retreating year by year, revealing stones that haven't seen the sun in ages. Creatures emerge, frozen in place for centuries, wool-cloaked mammals, broken trees, ancient pollen. Time spills from the cracks. Some scientists call this glacial archaeology. It sounds sterile, but the truth is haunting. A melting glacier does not just give us water, it gives us ghosts. The past rises like mist from the melt, showing us not only where we've been but how far we've come, and in some cases, how far we've drifted. Communities who once lived by glaciers, the Inupiat, the Sherpa, the Quechua, speak of them as living beings, spirits with breath and moods. To them, the glacier is not just a thing but a presence, a teacher, a god, a warning. And now, as the glaciers melt, their stories become even more vital because they teach us how to live with change, how to honor memory, how to find meaning in slow loss. In watching glaciers melt, we're forced to face something uncomfortable, that even the oldest, most enduring parts of our planet are vulnerable, that nothing is so permanent it cannot change. But there is a quiet beauty in this truth too, because if glaciers can transform, perhaps we can as well. If they can move mountains, perhaps we can move hearts. And if they can hold the past with grace, perhaps we can carry our own histories with softness. So let us walk beside them, not as masters or tourists, but as fellow travelers through time. Let us listen gently to what the ice has to say. Not just the data, but the feeling, the long, slow breath of a world that once was, and the trembling hush of what it's becoming. In the glacier's patience, we find a lesson. In its silence, a song. In its melt, a memory returned to water, flowing once more into the sea of now. Now imagine the final days of a glacier's long journey where its edges melt faster than it can grow, and its once glittering face turns to streams that wander downhill. These waters do not rush like rivers in spring. They trickle, they meander, they take their time. This is how endings arrive in nature, slowly, gently, almost unnoticed. And yet the transformation is complete. What was once solid becomes fluid. What was still becomes motion. The glacier, once a monument of stillness, returns to the cycle it once fed, water flowing, shaping, nourishing once again. This meltwater is not ordinary. It carries minerals scoured from stone, nutrients ground from mountains, the dust of continents now swirling in the stream. It seeps into soils, feeds grasses, fills lakes. In places where glaciers are dying, farmers find richer lands, flowers bloom in unexpected meadows, and rivers once dry in summer flow anew. The glacier leaves not only silence but life. And in this offering there is a soft kind of hope that even as it disappears, it gives. But this is not just a gift, it is a message, because too much melt too quickly changes everything. Glaciers that once fed rivers steadily now flood them. Valleys are overwhelmed, dams strained, deltas reshaped. In other places where glaciers vanish entirely, once reliable rivers dry out in summer, leaving fields thirsty and people searching. The rhythm has been broken. The memory has poured away too fast. Still, the glacier's final lesson is not fear but reverence. To stand in its shadow is to feel time pressing down, not in urgency but in weight, the weight of all that has been held, the laughter of ancient air, the breath of long-lost trees, the quiet sigh of a turning planet. It humbles us, this awareness that we are small, not unimportant but brief, that our time, like the glaciers, is part of something larger, flowing, cyclical. Even now, scientists are racing to preserve what they can. In icy vaults beneath mountains, samples of glacier ice are stored like sacred scrolls. Some carry ice from peaks already bare. Others hold air from millennia ago. These are not trophies but warnings, reminders that forgetting is easy and remembering is fragile. That if we lose these frozen memories, we lose a mirror that shows us not just where we are, but how we got here. There is poetry in the idea that Earth itself remembers, even when we forget. The glacier remembers when the forests were wide and the air was clean. It remembers when mammoths roamed beneath stars that burned brighter through a clearer sky. It remembers the volcanic nights and the long winters, the soft snowfall of untouched ages. And in this remembering it holds not just knowledge but feeling. A slow ache, a patient gaze. Now, as the world warms and the glaciers shrink, we are asked to remember too. Not only the data, not only the graphs, but the feeling of standing beside something ancient. The chill in the air, the blue of deep ice, the silence that stretches not in emptiness but in fullness, the knowledge that we are witnesses to a farewell and maybe even participants in it. Yet even as we lose, there is something left behind. In the valley carved by ice, new forests grow. In the lake born of melt, fish return. In the soil once pressed flat by glacier weight, seeds awaken. Nature does not mourn in the way we do. It transforms. And in this transformation, it shows us how to carry loss without breaking, how to turn stillness into movement, how to honor memory by letting it flow forward. Perhaps the glacier's true gift is not in what it preserves, but in how it teaches us to see time, not as a straight line, but as a circle, not as a race, but as a rhythm. We are not at the end, but in a turning, a moment where memory melts into meaning, a place where science and soul meet quietly beneath the breath of the mountains. And so we walk away from the glacier, not with answers but with awareness, that some stories are told in silence, that some truths are held in ice, that even the slowest melt leaves ripples that touch far beyond the mountains. The glacier may fade, but what it gave remains in the rivers, in the earth, in us. We remember because it remembered, and now its memory flows in our veins. Beneath the frozen crust of Earth's coldest places, where wind carries nothing but the sound of its own passing, there lies a silence older than history. This is not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of waiting. Here, beneath the heavy white shroud of glaciers, ancient life lingers. not in the way we understand life with movement and warmth, but in whispers of faint chemical signals, frozen pulses, a stillness so deep it almost becomes song. For buried beneath the ice are stories not just of water and stone, but of microbes, slumbering fossils, and forgotten warmth. In the shadows of glaciers, Earth keeps secrets. Long ago, when climates were warmer, life thrived even in the high mountains and far poles. Rivers carved through land now locked in ice, and forests once breathed where now there is only white. When the glaciers began their slow crawl across the land, they did not erase everything. Instead, they covered it like a book closed but not forgotten. And so, beneath the thick glacial sheets, ancient soils remain, along with the remnants of life that once grew upon them. Roots turned brittle but still present. Spores, wrapped in cold, still dreaming of spring. Microbes so small and so quiet that they have waited hundreds of centuries without light or warmth, waiting for the day the glacier might lift. In places where the ice has begun to thin, scientists have discovered astonishing things. Beneath layers of compressed snow and ancient dust, they've found living bacteria, not dead or dormant but alive, barely stirring, preserved by cold and time. These are not invaders but residents, tucked into the folds of ice like memories we don't realize we're still carrying. Some breathe without oxygen, others feed on minerals. All of them speak of life's persistence, its refusal to be erased, even when pressed beneath miles of cold. It's hard to imagine such resilience, that something so small could survive without sunlight, without warmth, for tens of thousands of years. And yet, here they are not just surviving but waiting, their biology slowed to the gentlest rhythm like a heartbeat just above stillness. Scientists call this state metabolic arrest, a kind of living pause. It's a lesson in patience. In the glacier's deepest places, life has learned to wait, to endure, to whisper instead of shout. These whispers reach out through the ice in unexpected ways. Sometimes, when a glacier cracks or calves, splitting off a great sheet of ice into the sea, it releases more than just frozen water. It releases air that hasn't been breathed in millennia, particles untouched by time, even scents that drift like faint echoes of vanished worlds. In those moments, the glacier becomes a doorway, and through it, the past steps forward. And it is not only microbes that whisper. There are fossilized remains, too, of mosses, insects, even birds. In the deepest ice, delicate wings have been found, preserved like pressed flowers. Some of these creatures lived before humans ever walked the earth. They flew over green valleys that now lie under a mile of ice. And now their wings return to light, still fragile, still beautiful, still telling us who they were. As we uncover these remnants, we also uncover ourselves. For the glacier is not separate from us. The cold it carries, the life it holds, the silence it maintains, all these things reflect something within us. We too carry quiet memories beneath our surface. Feelings frozen by time. Ideas waiting for the right moment to thaw. And just like the glacier, we release those memories not all at once, but in soft cracks, slow melt, quiet breathing. To touch ice that has not seen sunlight in 50,000 years is to touch time itself. It is to place your hand on a surface that has known no war, no cities, no machines, only sky, snow, and silence. And in that moment, you feel small but not insignificant. You become part of something larger, a witness to endurance, a listener to whispers long buried. The whispers beneath the frozen sheets are not loud. They do not demand attention, but they wait. And when the ice begins to thin, when light returns and warmth finds its way through, they will speak again, not in language but in presence, in the return of an ancient spore, in the scent of long-lost soil, in the way the wind, for a moment, carries something older than we are. And when that happens, we are reminded that nothing is truly lost, not if it is remembered, not if it is held even in silence, not if the glacier with all its stillness continues to whisper. Let's drift deeper beneath the frozen sheets, into the heart of the glacier where the world turns quiet beyond quiet, and the language of life becomes a hush. In this space, cold is not just temperature, it's history wrapped in stillness. The air becomes heavy with time, and the ice no longer feels like ice but like memory itself, pressed and layered and waiting. Here in the untouched layers, scientists have found not just fragments of the past but pieces of a vast, invisible puzzle, one that stretches across continents, across ages, across the very breadth of Earth. One of the most mysterious parts of this puzzle lies in subglacial lakes, vast, hidden bodies of water buried beneath miles of ice, sealed off from the sky for millions of years. Lake Vostok in Antarctica is one such place. Imagine a lake the size of a small country, trapped beneath 4 kilometers of solid ice, never touched by wind or sun. And yet it exists, liquid, dark, and alive. Probes lowered carefully into these buried waters have detected microbes thriving in total darkness, in crushing pressure, in isolation so complete it rivals the vacuum of space. These tiny beings defy what we thought life needed. They don't use sunlight. They don't feed on plants. They've built their own way of living, independent of everything we understand. And what they teach us is profound. That life, even when stripped of comfort, finds a way. That existence is not a luxury of light and warmth, but a determination of spirit even in the smallest forms. In these lakes there are chemical signatures that hint at sulfur cycles, iron metabolisms, even the slow dance of methane bubbles rising like ghostly music. It's not just science, it's poetry and chemistry, a biology of persistence. A testament that silence is not emptiness, but resilience. Some scientists believe that these hidden lakes are analogues for oceans on other worlds. Europa, one of Jupiter's icy moons, holds an ocean beneath its frozen surface. So does Enceladus, circling Saturn. If life can survive in the buried darkness of Earth's glaciers, then perhaps, somewhere in the cold reaches of the solar system, other whispers are waiting. The glacier becomes not just a memory of our world, but a mirror of others, distant, frozen worlds holding secrets in their own silent waters. Even above these lakes, in the layers of ice itself, there is motion. Not fast or obvious, but slow diffusion, the gentle drift of molecules across time. A single particle of air trapped in a bubble may slowly shift position over centuries. The boundaries blur. What was once sharp becomes soft. Ice, like memory, forgets and remembers in waves. It holds on, then lets go, only to hold on again. This motion is not chaos, it is rhythm. The slow heartbeat of a world that moves without sound. And sometimes the glacier speaks through sound after all. Deep within, ice cracks with sudden booms, not of violence but of shifting. Scientists call them icequakes. They echo like thunder trapped underground. And these sounds, recorded with special instruments, reveal movement, stress, adaptation. The glacier flexes, adjusts, responds. Like a sleeping body turning slightly in its rest, it shifts under weight, dreaming of gravity and ground. There's beauty in how this slowness is not stagnant. The glacier is alive, not in the way a forest is alive with motion and light, but in its own language. It measures time not in seconds but in centuries. It responds not with reaction but with presence. It erases and writes at the same time, sculpting mountains, burying valleys, and revealing bones long lost. It is not a museum but a living archive where the past and the possible coexist. And in the whispers from its depths there are also warnings. In recent decades, scientists have seen microbes awaken from ancient ice behave unpredictably. Some thrive, others falter, a few mutate. These awakenings are not just scientific curiosities, they are reminders that we do not fully understand what the glacier holds, that deep within the white silence there are things older than civilization and they are stirring, not with menace but with presence, with the quiet certainty that nothing stays buried forever. There is also light in these findings. In understanding how microbes survive under such extreme conditions, we learn new ways to treat illness, build technology, even design food for astronauts. The glacier teaches us not only where we've come from but where we might go. It becomes a teacher, one that speaks slowly but clearly, if only we are willing to listen long enough. And as we walk beside these ancient rivers of ice, we begin to understand something deeper about ourselves. That just as the glacier holds within it quiet life, quiet memories, quiet motion, so do we. We carry stories we have not yet told. We hold strength shaped by pressure. We survive long winters, inner and outer, waiting for the thaw. And when it comes, we too change shape, flowing into something new. To stand near a glacier is to stand in front of time itself, not the fast time of clocks and calendars, but the deep time of earth and stone and sky. It humbles, it awakens, it whispers. And in those whispers, we are reminded that the past is never truly gone. It waits in the dark, beneath the cold, beneath the stillness, not to haunt us, but to return to us when we are ready to hear. Now the glacier thins and its long sleep begins to stir. Light, once blocked by miles of frozen time, now touches surfaces hidden for eons. The melt is not sudden, but it is certain. Drop by drop, year by year, the great body of the glacier gives way. With each trickle of water, something ancient moves again. Not just the molecules of ice and mineral, but the quiet histories held within. The whispers beneath the frozen sheets rise like breath returning to lungs. And in that breath is a lesson not easily forgotten. As the glacier melts, it releases more than water. It opens doors to past worlds, revealing frozen forests, insect wings perfectly intact, pollen trapped like gold dust in glass. These fragments drift into modern time like visitors, unsure of their place in a world that no longer remembers them. Yet they arrive, carried gently on meltwater streams, telling of climates once warm, of skies rich with life, of an earth that has cycled through dreams of fire and frost. And it is not only relics of nature that reappear. In the thinning ice, remnants of ancient human presence are sometimes found. Tools, bones, even entire bodies preserved by cold, wanderers from lost times, now unearthed. Their clothing still clings to frozen skin. Their belongings, made of leather and stone, speak of lives once lived in landscapes we thought untouchable. These are not myths. They are moments paused in ice. They remind us that the line between history and memory is as thin as the surface of melting snow. With each revelation, the glacier changes. Its edges soften. Its once towering cliffs slump into rivulets. The ice no longer resists the sun, it welcomes it. This is not defeat but transformation. The glacier in its final act becomes water once more, joining rivers, feeding roots, flowing into oceans that touch every shore. It returns to motion. And in doing so, it reminds us that nothing, not even the coldest stillness, lasts forever. The meltwater is rich. It carries traces of life from beneath the ice, awakening ecosystems downstream. Algae bloom in glacial rivers, painting stones with soft greens. Mosses take hold where once only frost clung. Insects return, then birds, then mammals. Entire valleys change. The memory of the glacier becomes a cradle for new stories. It leaves behind not absence but opportunity. Life doesn't rush in. It tiptoes gently, carefully, honoring the space that was. And still, beneath the surface, some silence remains. Pockets of untouched ice linger, holding on just a little longer. These are the deepest whispers, the ones not yet ready to speak. They stay in shadow, waiting, listening. Because even as most of the glacier melts, it does not release everything all at once. It gives in chapters. It melts in memory. And in that rhythm there is grace. People who live near glaciers feel this change deeply. They see their mountains grow bare. Their rivers surge, then dwindle. They speak of the glacier as a friend growing older, growing fainter. And yet they also tell stories of what the glacier gave, the purity of its water, the richness of its soil, the peace of its presence. It is not only loss they feel, it is gratitude too. In these final moments, as the last sheets thin and the sun finds the core, the glacier becomes light. Not in the literal sense, but in the way it transforms weight into wisdom. Its pressure becomes understanding. Its age becomes insight. And though it vanishes, it leaves behind a changed world shaped by patience, carved by quiet, softened by time. To walk now where the glacier once lay is to walk on sacred ground. You step on stones it carried for centuries, stones once held deep in its heart. You breathe air made cleaner by its chill. You drink water touched by its cold. The glacier is gone, but it remains in these things, and in you. Because we too are shaped by what lies beneath, by memories long buried, by stories that whisper from within. We are not so different from glaciers. We carry pressure. We hold silence. We move slowly through time, reshaping the world even when no one sees. So when the glacier finally fades from sight, do not think of it as lost. Think of it as spoken, heard, understood. The whisper beneath the frozen sheet is not a cry of ending. It is a sigh of peace, a breath released after lifetimes of holding, a song low and long that drifts across valleys and oceans and into the heart of anyone willing to listen. And long after the last ice melts, that song will remain. High in the mountains, where clouds touch stone and air thins into silence, glaciers lie like sleeping rivers, frozen but never still. From afar they appear eternal, unmoving giants of ice perched on steep cliffs, their surfaces dappled by snow and time. But look closer and you begin to see the truth. They are moving. Slowly, gently, with a grace that escapes the hurried eye. These glaciers are time made visible, time that flows, cracks, melts, and reforms. They are the weeping of mountains, not in sorrow but in remembrance, a slow, sacred shedding of memory into water. When a glacier melts, it seems like a simple thing: ice turns to water, water flows away. But this melt is not sudden. It is the quiet labor of centuries. Each drop that falls from a glacial edge began as a snowflake, perhaps hundreds or thousands of years ago, high above in a different world. That snow was pressed by layers upon layers, becoming firn, then ice, then part of a slow, downward journey. It traveled through the glacier's body, bending around rock, flowing over cliffs, cracking under pressure, healing in cold. And then, one day, it reached the surface again, no longer a flake but a tear. These tears form rivulets on the glacier's face, snaking downward into icy blue channels. Some vanish into crevasses, disappearing for miles before emerging as streams far below. Others collect into pools, turquoise and still, as if the glacier pauses to look at its reflection. In these pools the sky looks deeper, the clouds more distant, and the silence is so complete that even a falling droplet echoes like a thought. Here, water is not just liquid, it is history in motion. A moment released after millennia of waiting. The melt is not without consequence. As glaciers shed their tears, they give rise to rivers that wind through valleys, feeding ecosystems, quenching thirsts, carving landscapes. These rivers do not just flow, they remember. They carry with them minerals from ancient rocks, nutrients ground from stone, and the cool breath of mountain solitude. People downstream may never see the glacier, but they drink its memory. In that way, every river that begins in ice is more than water. It is a message from the mountain, whispered downstream. But the glacier's melt is also a response to heat, to rising temperatures, to changes in seasons that come too fast, stay too long. The mountain does not weep in sadness, but it weeps nonetheless. Its glaciers retreat, edges collapse. Seracs fall with thunderous roars that echo through the valleys like distant drums. The ice that once clung tightly to stone begins to slip, revealing bare rock that hasn't felt air in thousands of years. This new rock is raw, scraped, and silent. It holds no moss, no soil, no memory yet. It waits, exposed, for the world to remake it. And as the glaciers retreat, the land transforms. What was once white becomes brown, then green. Alpine meadows emerge, flowers bloom in unlikely places, and insects return to explore new ground. Some call this recovery, others call it loss. The truth, perhaps, lies in between, a kind of transition that carries both hope and sorrow. The glacier is gone, but the water remains. The shape has changed, but the story continues. In every drop that falls from the ice, a memory is passed forward, not erased, but rewritten. For those who live near these glaciers, the change is personal. They have watched the ice shrink year by year, season by season. What once took days to reach now lies beyond reach. Children grow up where their parents once skated. Streams dry where springs used to bubble. But they also see the beauty in what emerges: new trails, new life, new beginnings. They do not curse the glaciers weeping. They honor it, because they understand what it gives. And sometimes, in quiet moments, they hear the glacier speak. Not in words, but in sound, the creak of shifting ice, the rush of hidden meltwater beneath the surface, the sudden crack of a serac breaking loose. These are not signs of collapse but signs of movement. The glacier is alive. It breathes, it shifts, it lets go. It responds to the world around it, slowly but surely, with a patience that humbles. When you stand at the base of a weeping glacier, you feel something ancient pressing in. The air is cool but heavy. The wind carries whispers, and the water, as it falls in soft trickles or sudden bursts, speaks not just of melting but of memory. It is the past becoming present, the mountain letting go of what it has held for too long. So when mountains weep, they are not breaking. They are remembering. They are transforming. They are giving back what they held, one drop at a time. And in those drops, we are reminded that time flows not only forward but also down, through ice, into rivers, into us. Let's follow the path of those glacial tears as they leave their icy cradle and begin the long descent through stone and soil. The water that slips from melting glaciers is not like ordinary water. It is charged with memory. It moves with a purpose carved by time. As it flows, it traces the contours of valleys once shaped by the glacier itself, like a child running a hand along the wrinkles of an elder's face. Every bend in the stream is a sentence, every cascade a phrase. It is language without words, a history told in motion. Beneath the surface, the water stirs the bedrock. It gathers minerals, awakens buried seeds, feeds mosses that creep across stones newly freed from their icy cage. These streams birth wetlands where dragonflies hover and reeds sway gently in mountain breezes. What was once a world of white and blue becomes painted in green and gold. And yet, the water does not forget where it came from. It keeps its coolness, its purity, its rhythm. It remembers the slow press of centuries, the silence of deep crevasses, the hush of snowfall that built its body flake by flake. In time, these glacial streams merge into rivers, some wide and slow, others fast and foaming. They travel through forests, past villages, down canyons carved by their ancestors, earlier flows from earlier melts. And wherever they pass, they leave a mark, not just on land but in lives. Farmers rely on their steady presence. Animals migrate according to their seasonal rhythms. Entire cultures grow along their banks. In this way, the glacier's weeping becomes a kind of service, not a loss but a gift. Its tears irrigate, nourish, sustain. But there is a cost when the tears come too quickly. When warming accelerates the melt, glaciers cannot keep pace. Their slow, steady contributions become torrents. Valleys flood, lakes swell. In places like the Himalayas and the Andes, glacial lakes have become fragile bowls of water poised to burst. When they do, the force is tremendous, washing away roads, homes, forests. This is not the glacier's choice. It is the earth, responding to imbalance. The mountain does not intend to harm. It simply can no longer hold what once was still. Scientists now measure glaciers not in expansion but in retreat. Satellite images show edges shrinking year by year. Old maps show white where now there is only rock. The melt rate is no longer poetic, it is measurable. And yet, even in this urgency, there is a kind of grace, the grace of transformation. Because with retreat comes revelation. New terrain is exposed. Ancient soil breathes again. Species return that once fled. And human eyes at last are opened. We begin to understand that the glacier's slow melt is not just about temperature. It is about time, memory, cause and effect. It is about the delicate balances that hold life together, balances that shift when glaciers begin to move too fast or disappear too soon. We realize that our own lives are tied to these cold rivers, that what happens high in the mountains eventually flows into our taps, our fields, our seas. In some places, people build small altars near the glacial streams. They place stones, offer flowers, leave messages. They do not pray to the glacier, but they honor it. They thank it for the water, the shade, the calm. Children learn where the rivers begin. Elders remember how far the ice once reached. Stories are passed down about the singing of the ice, the roar of the calving, the sudden silence after a serac falls. These are not myths but memories, not fiction but feeling. And as scientists continue their work, drilling cores, mapping flows, measuring chemical signatures, they too speak reverently of what the glaciers have taught. They speak of isotopes, of carbon layers, of isotopic shifts, But beneath the data is awe, a quiet reverence for the patience of frozen water, the gentleness of ancient ice. They know they are not merely measuring loss, they are listening to a farewell. For the glacier is not just a feature of geography, it is a participant in Earth's great breathing. It inhales snow, exhales water, it thickens and thins with rhythm, it rests and moves, it carves and creates. When it weeps, it doesn't just respond to heat, it sings a final stanza in a song long sung, a song of balance, of transformation, of continuity. And perhaps the most moving part of this song is what follows the silence. Because when the glacier's weeping slows and the last drops fall into the stream, something new begins. The land, touched by centuries of ice, begins to awaken. Grasses root in the softened soil. Trees stretch tentative limbs into the light. Animals step cautiously onto ground not walked for millennia. And we, witnessing this gentle unfolding, are reminded of our place in the rhythm. We are not separate from these changes. We are made of water, shaped by time, carried by memory, just like the stream. When mountains weep, they do not cry alone. Their tears touch every part of us. In the stillness of retreat, we feel the invitation, not just to observe, but to care, to respond, to remember. Now the glacier stands at the edge of its long journey, a body of memory slowly becoming water. The mountain no longer holds it tightly. The cold no longer grips it as fiercely. What remains is a soft surrender, a quiet letting go of what once was, a final offering to the world below. The last sheets thin under morning sun. The cracks spread gently, not in panic but in permission. The glacier, once vast and mighty, becomes something new, not less, just changed. In this slow unraveling there is no collapse, there is a release. The final streams pour down rocky slopes, weaving through meadows where grasses have begun to bloom. Flowers nod beside the flow, their roots drinking deeply from what was once ice. Bees hover, frogs sing, and the ground, long frozen and still, now trembles with life. It is not a loud awakening, but a gradual bloom. The meltwater seeps into everything, into soil, into stone, into silence. And as it moves, it remembers. The glacier is no longer visible, but it is not gone. Its shape has become many things: rivers, lakes, mist that rises in the morning, dew that settles on leaves. It spreads. The people who come to see the place where the glacier once lived do not find a monument. There are no flags, no markers, no memorial plaques, just a wide, empty space where white once shimmered. And yet that emptiness speaks. It speaks in the sound of running water, in the hush of wind across newly exposed stone. Children play where once there was only silence. Their laughter rises like birdsong, echoing against bare cliffs. Life goes on, but it carries the ghost of something beautiful. A presence that shaped the land and then stepped aside. In some places, artists come to paint the vanishing glaciers. They do not try to capture every detail, only the feeling, the vastness, the loneliness, the awe. Their brushstrokes tell of blue shadows and silver light, of crevasses that stretch like forgotten dreams, of distant thunder as ice breaks and falls. These paintings hang in galleries far from the mountains, and yet they hold something real. They remind viewers that not all stories are told in words. Some are told in silence, some in water, some in absence. Others come to write. Poets walk the trails and sit beside glacial streams, notebooks open, trying to capture the language of loss. Their verses are soft like snow, like sighs. They speak of a world shifting underfoot, of change too large to name, too slow to stop. But not all poems are mournful. Some celebrate the resilience that follows. The way life returns, not the same but persistent. The way memory turns into meaning. For the scientists, the work does not end. They continue to measure, to compare, to forecast, but they also begin to reflect. The data is more than numbers. It is a portrait of change, a story told in temperature, in melt rates, in disappearing edges. And in their observations there is reverence, not just for what has been lost, but for what has been understood. The glacier has taught us to pay attention, to slow down, to listen, not only to ice but to ourselves. Because deep inside, we too know what it means to let go. We know how it feels to melt slowly from something we used to be into something we are still becoming. We know the weight of memory, the slow burn of change, the longing to hold on. But we also know the peace that can come from release, when the pressure lifts, when the silence is no longer lonely but full, when what we carried becomes something we give. And so the glacier's final act is not destruction. It is offering. It is the past flowing into the present, asking only to be noticed, to be felt, to be remembered. Its water will flow far, into places it has never touched before, into the veins of trees, into the pulse of animals, into the breath of those who walk and drink and live without ever knowing where the water began. But you will know, because you stood at the edge. You saw the weeping mountain. You listened to the whispers in the ice. And you understood, if only for a moment, what it means to endure, to release, to transform. This is not the end of the glacier's story. It is simply the next chapter, written in water, spoken in streams, carried in clouds, falling again as snow. And somewhere high in the mountains that snow will gather. It will layer. It will press and deepen. And maybe, just maybe, one day it will become a glacier again. And the mountains will remember. Far beneath the surface of glaciers, under the crushing silence and endless weight, there is something stirring. Not in sound, not in motion, but in presence. It is the breath of the planet, slow, unseen, and ancient. While the world above bustles with life and movement, beneath the ice, Earth inhales. It draws in cold, traps air, seals away the whispers of sky and forest, volcano and sea. And within that frozen breath, stories are held, not written in ink but etched in frost, preserved in bubbles no wider than a raindrop. This is the breath beneath the ice, and it is older than language. And snow falls, it seems light, almost weightless. But over time, snowfall becomes memory. Each layer presses upon the last, packing tightly, squeezing out warmth and sound until only silence remains. And in that silence, tiny pockets of atmosphere are caught, air from summers long past, the size of ocean, the exhale of trees that no longer stand. These bubbles of trapped breath form a time capsule, untouched by light, unchanged by motion. They wait, suspended in blue ice like thoughts frozen mid-sentence. For scientists, these bubbles are more than curiosities. They are maps. They carry within them the exact composition of ancient air, the levels of carbon, the trace gases of past eras, even hints of pollen, ash, or salt. By studying these bubbles, we learn what the Earth once breathed. We hear the faint echoes of forest fires that raged before cities, of volcanic eruptions that blanketed skies before any eyes looked up. We see how the planet has changed, how it warmed and cooled, how it cycled between glacial and green, how its breath has risen and fallen with time. And yet the story is not just about data. There's something deeply human in this act of listening to frozen air. It's as if we are reaching back through time, pressing an ear to the ice, hopping to hear something familiar. And perhaps we do, because the breath beneath the ice is not alien. It is ours. We have always shared this atmosphere with the birds, the trees, the oceans, the glaciers. What they breathed, we breathe still. And what we breathe now, the future will inherit. The glacier in this way becomes a lung. A slow, massive lung that breathes in over centuries, holds its breath for millennia, then exhales in melt and mist. It doesn't heave or pant or gasp. It simply exists in rhythm with the planet, a rhythm too slow for the eye, too quiet for the ear, but unmistakable in its presence. And when the ice melts, it exhales. The bubbles burst. The ancient air escapes, touching today for the first time. Some of it, when sampled and released, drifts across the laboratory. A breath last taken by a mammoth, now shared with a scientist. This connection is profound. It reminds us that nothing truly disappears. Air moves in cycles. Carbon is traded between stone and leaf, ocean and sky. The molecules we inhale may have once circled inside a fern, a falcon, or a fire. The air beneath the ice is not just a sample. It is a memory made physical, a link between the now and the then, a thread of continuity through time. And as glaciers melt, they release more than breath. They release the temperature of the past. The very warmth or chill of ancient days lingers in the ice. Scientists have learned to read these signals, small differences in isotopes, slight shifts in crystal structures, all of which speak in the language of temperature, pressure, time. The ice is a diary of seasons, A frozen logbook of years where the summers came late or the rains never fell. It holds no judgment. It simply records. When we stand before a glacier, we are often struck by its size, its width, its height, its weight, but we seldom think of its interior, of the invisible breath it holds. The glacier is not hollow, yet it carries within it more air than one might imagine. It is porous with history. Its body is laced with the soft exhalations of time, and in that air there is peace. Because the glacier does not rush. It holds what it must until the world is ready to receive it again. In this way, the breath beneath the ice becomes a kind of offering, a message carried across millennia, not in haste but in care, not in volume but in silence. It is the glacier's way of remembering for us, of keeping safe what we were not yet ready to understand. And now, as the ice recedes and the breath escapes, we are given that chance to understand, to respond, to remember. So let us listen, not with ears but with awareness. Let us walk the icy paths not as conquerors but as students, because beneath the surface, beneath the cracks and cold, there is breath, and that breath is still alive. Let's descend into the depths of that breath, into the very chambers where air sleeps within the glacier's heart. These are not vast caverns, not hollow tunnels echoing with sound. They are tight, compressed spaces, where molecules are packed in so densely that motion nearly ceases. The ice becomes a library and each bubble a page. But unlike a book of ink and paper, this one must be read with instruments, patience, and a kind of reverence. Because what lies inside these tiny spheres is not just atmosphere. It is the living memory of Earth. In one layer, the air may speak of a warm age, when forests stretched farther and deserts were small. In another, it whispers of an ice age's grip, when even oceans shrank beneath the pull of glaciers expanding across continents. The chemical signatures reveal these truths in code: slight increases in carbon dioxide, small drops in methane, delicate shifts in nitrogen balance. To the trained eye, it is a story written in breath. A gentle unfolding of the planet, lungs over the span of hundreds of thousands of years. But these bubbles are more than records. They are witnesses. The breath they contain was once part of storms that rolled across ancient lands, inhaled by creatures that no longer exist, exhaled by trees whose roots are now fossils. Each time a glacier grows, it captures the voice of that age, its warmth, its pressure, its dust, its scent. And then it holds it close, hidden from light, until the world changes enough to melt the page and let it speak. Some of the air is startlingly old. In cores taken from Antarctica, scientists have retrieved bubbles over 800,000 years old. That air predates the earliest forms of language, cities, even modern humans. When released, it flows gently into the room, carrying with it the feel of a time before thought had shape, before memory had names. It's hard not to feel small when standing beside such a breath. Not insignificant, but humbled, like being handed a relic too precious to hold tightly. But what do these breaths tell us? They speak not just of the past, but of the present in disguise. They show that the air we breathe now is different, not wrong, but altered. The rapid rise of carbon, the unfamiliar pulse of modern heat, these are changes that have no match in ancient layers. The breath beneath the ice becomes a warning, a mirror. It asks us to notice, to feel, to remember that the sky above us is not eternal. It too changes with us. And yet the breath is also gentle. It does not shout its message. It drifts upward as the glacier melts, joins the winds that circle the globe, becomes part of us without force. In a way, we become the final vessels of the glacier's memory. The air it held for millennia now fuels our thoughts, our words, our songs. And in that cycle, the glacier lives on. Beyond the gases, there is even more. Inside the ice, water molecules themselves carry records. Their ratios of heavy water to light, of deuterium to hydrogen, paint pictures of temperature long past. A warm year leaves a different pattern than a cold one. A sudden volcanic eruption may scatter ash across a layer, a dark line of silence where sunlight once failed. The glacier does not forget. It remembers heat and cold and ash and calm. It remembers the quiet moments between catastrophes, the slow seasons of stillness. And sometimes, deep inside, it remembers life. In rare pockets, scientists have found biological material, pollen grains, fungal spores, even viruses so old they barely register in our timelines. These are not dangerous, not in the way we imagine. They are dormant dreams, frozen and quiet. If thawed, they might stir, or they might dissolve, never having the chance to bloom again. But in their presence, we see that the glacier did not just hold air. It held possibility. People who work with these ice cores speak often of wonder. The work is slow, the lab cold, the instruments delicate. But the feeling when a new layer is revealed is one of quiet awe. To hold a tube of ice and know that it contains the breath of a sky no one alive has ever seen, it is an experience that dissolves time. For a moment, the present and the past are one. For a moment, the glacier breathes through us. There is something beautiful about the slowness of it all. In a world that moves quickly, that demands urgency and speed, the glacier reminds us of another rhythm, a deeper one, a breath that takes centuries to inhale and just as long to let go. And yet, it continues without pause, without resistance. It teaches us that holding on can be an act of grace, and that letting go when the time comes can be an act of love. So as the glacier softens and its breath escapes, let us not rush to mourn. Let us listen. Let us feel the air on our skin, knowing it came from a place of silence, a place of patience. The breath beneath the ice is rising, not in fear but in offering. And if we listen closely enough, we might just understand what it's trying to say. Now imagine the glacier's final exhale, not a gasp, not a cry, but a slow and graceful release. The breath that has waited beneath the ice for millennia begins to rise. It slips out as the surface warms, flows gently into the sky and disappears into the wind. This air is not loud. It does not demand attention, but it carries weight not in pressure but in memory. It carries the story of an earth that once breathed differently, that once cooled and warmed in its own slow rhythm, guided by cycles older than we can see. The final moments of a glacier are quiet ones. There is no explosion, no sudden collapse. The ice thins and the cracks widen. The once bright surface dulls with meltwater. Pools form where ridges used to stand. The air grows warmer and the pressure changes. And slowly the glacier lets go of what it has held for so long. The breath beneath the ice escapes not in a rush, but in a sigh, like someone exhaling after holding their thoughts for too long. It drifts upward, invisible, joining the great atmosphere that surrounds us all. And with that breath comes a kind of awakening. For those who live nearby, the change is tangible. They feel it in the warmth of streams that used to run icy. They see it in the shape of clouds that gather above valleys now bare. The sound of melting becomes a background rhythm, steady, persistent, soft. People walk where ice once lay thick. They see stones once hidden, now dry and sunlit. They feel the ground beneath them shift in tone, and they know though the glacier may be gone, its breath remains. In science, we often seek precision. We speak of gas concentrations, isotopic readings, oxygen ratios. But there are other truths that numbers cannot hold. The way it feels to inhale ancient air, the quiet sense of time collapsing, the recognition that what we breathe today has journeyed through forms we'll never fully understand. The breath beneath the ice becomes a bridge, connecting the past to the present not through knowledge alone, but through feeling. And the feeling is not just one of loss. There is gratitude in the breath. The glacier did not have to keep these memories. It could have melted long ago, leaving no trace. But it chose, or rather, it existed in such a way that it preserved. It waited. And when we were ready, it offered what it had saved, not with urgency, but with trust, as if it believed we might learn from what it held. This gift changes us. It teaches us to value silence, to listen to what is not said, to pay attention to the spaces between events, the pauses, the rests, the breath. And in doing so, we begin to see the glacier not as something lost, but as something completed. It served its purpose. It breathed in the past. It held that breath with care. And now it has exhaled. The cycle continues. In some places, ceremonies are held for melting glaciers. People gather not just to mourn, but to honor. They bring flowers, they sing songs, they speak softly of what the glacier meant. not just as a source of water but as a symbol of time, of memory, of patience. These ceremonies are not grand. They are intimate. They are about the breath, acknowledging it, thanking it, letting it go. And in doing so, people carry a piece of the glacier forward in their own lives. Because now the breath lives in us. In every inhale, we take in pieces of ancient sky, of forgotten storms, of forests that once stood where deserts now stretch. We carry these molecules through our veins, into our thoughts, into our words. The glacier is no longer distant. It is inside us, and we become its storytellers. Long after the last ice has melted, long after the last core has been studied, the breath will remain. It will fall again as snow. It will freeze into new glaciers. It will rise in steam, drift across oceans, enter leaves, swirl through the lungs of children not yet born. It will continue as all breath does, quiet, steady, eternal. So let us remember the breath beneath the ice, not with sorrow but with reverence. It was a breath that waited for us, a breath that held knowledge too subtle to rush, a breath that trusted we might someday listen. And now that it has risen, now that it surrounds us, may we breathe it in with wonder. Because every breath is a chance to remember. And memory, like air, never truly disappears. Cold is not just a sensation. It is a keeper, a preserver, a quiet guardian of time. Where warmth hastens decay and motion, cold slows everything down until even change seems to pause. And in that stillness, memory survives. In the cold, stories are not erased, they are kept perfectly as if waiting for the world to remember. The chill of glaciers is more than temperature. It is an archive, a cradle of forgotten years, wrapped not in paper or stone but in frost and silence. The cold carries memory the way a hand carries snow, gently, with care, and only for as long as it is held still. Imagine a single flake of snow drifting down on a quiet night 1,000 years ago. It lands gently, unnoticed, on the shoulder of a glacier. That flake becomes part of something larger, pressed beneath layers of new snow, squeezed by time and weighed into a crystal of ice. Trapped within it are particles from the sky, dust from distant deserts, a trace of salt from the sea. That one flake becomes a memory not just of its fall, but of the world in the moment it fell. And as more snow gathers above, it is carried downward, layer by layer, deeper into the cold. As the glacier thickens, the memories within it deepen. Pressure transforms snow into firn, firn into ice, and ice into history. Nothing is lost. Even the light once touched by the snowflake seems to echo faintly in the ice's blue glow. Inside this frozen structure, time bends. 1,000 years ago is just inches away from today, close enough to touch, but separated by silence and cold. The deeper you go, the further back you travel. Each stratum is a chapter, each bubble a footnote, each fracture a breath caught mid-sentence. In these frozen depths, Earth keeps its memories safe. Trees that no longer exist left behind pollen that now rests in the ice. Volcanoes that darken the skis left behind ash that streaks through layers like soot on forgotten parchment. Ancient storms breathed into the air, and that air now sleeps in bubbles no larger than pinheads. The cold did not erase these things. It preserved them. And when the time comes, when we drill, when we melt, when we listen, they return, unchanged, unaged. But cold does not only preserve what is physical, it also preserves rhythm. In the patterns of ice accumulation and melt, in the shape of glacial valleys and the curve of moraines, we can read the heartbeat of Earth. These are not events that pass and vanish. They are cycles, pulses. Like memory itself, they return again and again, shaped slightly differently but always familiar. Glaciers expand and retreat. Snow falls, ice melts. Seasons change, but the cold remembers them all. Not just with accuracy, but with patience. There is a softness in how the cold holds memory. It does not bind it tightly, it lets it rest. It keeps it without altering it, like a lullaby hummed for centuries. In cold places, even sound seems slower. Footsteps are muffled. Voices carry less far. It is as if the cold wraps the world in a hush, asking everything to slow down, to remember, to be still. And in that stillness, clarity blooms. We begin to notice things we otherwise overlook. The way light scatters across frost, the way ice creaks under pressure, the way even silence has texture. For those who study glaciers, this quality of memory is not just poetic, it's essential. The data found in ice cores is unlike anything else on Earth. It is not reconstructed from guesswork or imagination. It is direct evidence, unchanged and unchanging. It tells us about past climates, ecosystems, even cosmic events. In the cold, we find the exact moment when a meteor scattered dust into the atmosphere. We find the trace of ancient fires. We find the breath of creatures that have no name. And each of these findings comes with the same lesson. Memory, when kept in cold, lasts longer than stone. In some ways, the cold is a gift of time. Not more time, but preserved time. Time set aside, kept whole, unspoiled. And that gift is not limited to ice alone. In permafrost, ancient seeds have been found and replanted. In frozen soil, the bodies of animals and people rest nearly untouched by decay. Their hair still soft, their skin still marked by tattoos. Their presence is a bridge not to ghosts but to lives that once were. Cold does not judge or distort, it simply holds. There is something sacred about this kind of holding. It asks nothing. It changes nothing. It simply waits until someone is ready to remember. And when they are, the memory is there, whole, quiet, unchanged, as if no time has passed at all. So when we speak of glaciers melting, we are not just speaking of ice turning to water. We are speaking of memory being released, of stories long held being let go into the air, the rivers, the sea. Some of these memories will vanish. Others will transform, but all of them will move. The cold can no longer keep them, and now we must carry them ourselves. Let us now journey further into that quiet realm where the cold not only holds memory, it shapes it. Beneath the glacier's vast silence, where pressure grows and time slows, the very structure of ice becomes a record. The alignment of crystals, the folding of layers, the delicate dance of trapped gases, all of it is part of a long, patient memory making. These are not random patterns, not accidents of temperature. They are stories in structure. Cold does not simply preserve memory, it composes it with care. In these frozen chapters, scientists see evidence of worlds we never knew. A sudden layer of soot may reveal a fire that burned across continents. A sharp shift in isotopes may speak of a volcanic winter, a time when the sun dimmed and frost bit deeper into the earth. Traces of salt can mark ancient sea spray from oceans no longer in reach. All of these signs, all of these moments, locked beneath our feet in places too cold for rot, too still for erosion. Time in the cold is not lost, it is folded. And within these folds we find rhythm. The cold remembers in pulses. Thin layers of ice may mark dry years. Thick bands speak of seasons rich with snow. Each oscillation is a breath of the planet in, out, like tides frozen in place. The glacier does not forget these patterns. They are its heartbeat. They are the marks it leaves on the world as it moves, slowly shaping valleys, bending rivers, pressing stones into silence. Every creak, every shift, every glacial groove is a line in Earth's long diary. We don't always know what the cold is keeping until it begins to melt. As glaciers retreat, they unveil their archives. Not just ice, but objects, bones, tools, even entire landscapes long sealed away. In Norway and the Alps, archaeologists have found wooden skis older than written history, hunting spears from times when the highlands were green, cloth worn by forgotten travelers who crossed these icy paths long before maps were drawn. The cold kept their presence intact. Not alive but not lost, waiting, preserved in perfect pause. This kind of memory is more than historical. It's emotional. There's a weight that comes from touching something the cold has kept safe. A feeling that this is not just a relic, but a voice. A fragment of someone's day, the way they held a tool, the steps they took, the way their breath once mixed with the same sky we breathe now. The cold offers us these moments like small gifts, reminders that time is not linear, and that what we call the past is sometimes just the present paused. Even the land beneath the glacier remembers. As the ice presses down, it reshapes the crust. The earth bows under its weight, then slowly rebounds as the ice retreats. Scientists call this glacial isostatic adjustment. It is a rising, a return, a physical memory of pressure once endured. The land itself swells upward, sometimes centuries after the glacier has gone, as if the planet, too, is remembering what it carried and gently letting it go. And in the midst of this remembering, life finds its way back. Lichens creep across newly exposed stone. Mosses bloom in melt-fed crevices. Seeds, long buried, begin to stir. The glacier departs, and what it leaves behind is not just rock, but readiness. A landscape prepared to begin again. A surface freshly awakened by the cold's long embrace. We might think of memory as something soft, a feeling, a thought, a scent. But in the glacier, memory is stone-hard and ice-clear. It is physical, layered, pressed into form. And yet it still holds all the softness of feeling. When scientists melt cores in their labs, they do not only analyze, they listen. The first hiss of ancient air escaping is like a whisper from a world before ours. The first drip of meltwater feels sacred. This is not just science. It is witnessing. Cold changes what it keeps, but only slightly. It slows processes, delays reactions, wraps life in slumber. Some microbes awaken after thousands of years. Some cells revive when touched by warmth. Not all survive. Not all memories wake up cleanly. But even in what is lost, something is felt. Even decay can be beautiful when it comes slowly, when it comes with grace. The cold has always carried memory for us. Before we had written language, before we built stone monuments, before we drew on cave walls, there was ice. It held what we could not hold. It waited while we forgot. And now, as it melts, we are invited to remember. Not just the data, but the meaning. Not just the facts, but the feeling. Because every layer of cold is also a lesson in time. It teaches us patience. It shows us how to hold something dearly, quietly, and for as long as it takes. It reminds us that sometimes the most important things are not loud or fast or new. They are slow, still, and old. And they wait silently for us to come back and listen. So as the glaciers thin, as the permafrost softens, as the snowline creeps upward, let us listen to what the cold has carried. Not just for knowledge, but for connection. For in that frozen memory, we find not just the past, we find ourselves. Now the cold begins to lift, slowly and softly, like a heavy blanket being drawn back at the break of dawn. The glacier thins, the frost retreats, and the silence loosens its grip. With every drop that falls from melting ice, a piece of memory is released, not lost, but freed. The cold has done its part. It held the world's breath for centuries. It cradled the past with care. And now, in its gentle unraveling, it passes those memories forward, allowing the earth to exhale. The first thing to return to these places is light. Sunlight touches surfaces that haven't seen brightness in thousands of years. Stones glint with a warmth they do not recognize. Dusk glows as it dances across winds newly allowed to flow. The glacier's body softens, becomes translucent at the edges, then breaks into fragments that shimmer in meltwater pools. And within those fragments, stories float: ancient gases, pollen grains, microbial fossils, once silent, now moving again. The cold kept them still, but the warmth lets them speak. The air changes too. It grows richer with the breath of time. That ancient air, once trapped deep in the ice, drifts out and mixes with the present. It is imperceptible, but it is there. Molecules that once circled the globe in forgotten ages, now shared again. When we breathe deeply in these places, we inhale more than oxygen. We inhale the echo of an earlier Earth. That is the quiet miracle of cold memory. It enters us quietly, unnoticed, and becomes part of us. As the glacier recedes, it leaves behind a canvas not empty but prepared. The newly exposed ground is raw at first. Jagged rocks, powdered silt, scattered gravel. But this is fertile space. Seeds blow in on the wind. Birds land and rest. Lichens begin to draw meaning from the bare stone. Over time, mosses unfurl and the first green stirs against gray. Each plant that grows here is a living response to what the cold preserved, a new chapter written on a page that had been closed for millennia. And so memory becomes transformation. What was frozen becomes flowing. What was still becomes growing. The glacier is no longer a weight upon the land. It becomes part of the land. Its water sinks into soil, moves through roots, travels through trunks, and lifts again as mist to the sky. The cold carries memory not just in storage, but in circulation. Through the cycle of melt and growth and breath, the past is never truly behind us. It moves in circles, always returning in new forms. Communities who live near these changing landscapes understand this intuitively. They do not speak of the glacier only in terms of science, but in terms of spirit. It was a guardian, a provider, a teacher. And now that it retreats, they mourn, yes, but they also adapt. They gather water with more care. They honor the land newly revealed. They share stories that root the memory deeper than any core sample could. Their traditions become part of the glacier's afterlife, living memory shaped by those who watch the cold do its work. The scientists continue their careful studies. They log temperatures, track retreat, measure the chemistry of meltwater. But even in their precision, there is reverence. They know that what is being lost is irreplaceable, not because the data cannot be stored elsewhere, but because the presence of the glacier itself was the memory. Its body, its silence, its breath, all of it was the archive. And as it melts, that archive dissolves. The notes remain, but the music fades. Still, there is beauty in what follows. Lakes form in the glacier's hollowed bed. Birds nest where snow once ruled. New ecosystems rise like quiet prayers, and all of it carries traces of the past. The cold memory becomes warm action. What was held is now shared. What was hidden is now lived. The glacier does not vanish into nothing. It becomes part of everything, in rivers, in leaves, in lungs. And we who once stood at a distance now step into that space. We walk where ice once pressed. We see the paths it carved, the rocks it shaped, the stories it told in silence. And we remember, not because we were there, but because the cold carried that moment to us, preserved in a way only ice could manage. We inherit not just the knowledge, but the responsibility to hold memory with the same patience, the same grace. So when you next feel the chill of wind or stand in the presence of frost, pause. Feel what the cold carries. It may be more than temperature. It may be the quiet breath of a season long gone. It may be the memory of a sky the world has forgotten. Or it may be your own memory, waiting, returning, unfolding like ice beneath morning sun. Because in the end, that is what the cold has always done. It has carried memory forward, and now it is our turn. Before a river sings, before it roars or rushes, it is quiet. It begins in a silence so deep that most will never hear it. Beneath the great weight of a glacier, in the darkness where no roots reach and no birds fly, water is born, not in thunder but in stillness. A trickle inside a chamber of ice, a drop gathering beneath layers of snow pressed into history. This is the beginning. The first pulse of a river does not know where it will go. It does not know what it will touch. It only knows how to move, slowly, patiently, shaped by pressure and time. And so the rivers born in silence begin their journey. Glaciers are often thought of as still, frozen, unmoving. But inside, they are alive with motion. Tiny streams flow through melt channels beneath the surface, threading through tunnels carved by warmth and gravity. These channels are ancient and ever-changing, shifting year by year, forming braids and loops, vanishing and reforming again. This labyrinth of liquid carries the earliest waters of rivers not yet seen, and each drop that moves through it has waited centuries to be set free. Some melt from deep within, warmed by the friction of movement. Others arrive from above, where the sun touches the surface just enough to coax snow into fluid. At first, this water is shy. It does not rush. It seeps, it pools, it gathers strength. And as it moves, it learns. It learns the shape of the land beneath. It feels the texture of stone, the cold of bedrock, the silence of being alone. And when enough water gathers, it begins to push. It creates pathways where there were none, smooths walls that once resisted. It flows downward, not with violence, but with certainty. The glacier becomes a womb, and the river, a child of ice and time. When the meltwater finally emerges from beneath the glacier, it is something transformed. It bursts into daylight with a clarity unmatched, pure and cold, the color of sky trapped in stone. This water carries with it the signature of everything it touched: ancient minerals, the soft grit of powdered rock, the chill of 1,000 winters. And in this first light it begins to sing. Not loudly, not yet, but with a steady voice that echoes through valleys, a murmur that says, "I am here. I have begun." The land receives it like a blessing. Mosses bloom at the edges. Insects skim the surface. Birds come to drink. The first blades of grass bend gently to meet it. A ribbon of life begins to form, thin but unwavering. This is not just water. It is the memory of snow, the breath of stone, the voice of silence now given motion. It is ancient but new. It is small but determined. Some rivers remain near their source, winding softly through alpine meadows and between mossy stones. Others grow large and strong, fed by the glacier's steady melt. They become arteries of the landscape, pulsing through mountains, feeding forests, connecting distant lands. Entire civilizations rise along their banks. Crops are watered by their flow. Villages grow from their song. And yet at their heart they are still children of silence. They carry the hush of their birth beneath every current. And this silence remains even in their strength. Listen closely to a glacial river and you can still hear it beneath the splash, beneath the rush, that low hum, that ancient rhythm. It is not the noise of hurry but the sound of patience. The river does not race. It follows the pull of gravity with grace. It does not demand its path, it discovers it. This is the wisdom of rivers born in silence. They do not need to shout to be powerful. They simply move. To witness the start of such a river is to witness time awakening. One cannot stand beside the source without feeling small, not in weakness but in wonder. You see water dripping from an ice shelf, pooling into a stream, and know that it carries within it not just cold but history. And in that moment you understand. This river is not just a body of water. It is the unfolding of memory into the world. It is the glacier's soft farewell. And so the rivers move, tracing the edges of mountains, drawing lines across valleys. They do not forget where they came from. Every twist and turn, every curve and fall is shaped by the silence that bore them. They are not merely channels for water. They are carriers of a story, one told in melt, in flow, in the spaces between sound. They speak of what it means to begin quietly and to move with purpose. Let us now follow that river as it winds farther from its glacial source, gathering speed, strength, and story. Though it began in stillness, the river grows into something more, a moving memory that reflects everything it touches. The cold clarity of its origin fades just slightly as it mixes with rain, with runoff, with soil and leaves. Yet something essential remains. Deep within its current is the rhythm of silence. Even as it passes through noise, birdsong, wind, the rustle of branches, the river remembers where it came from. Beneath every surface ripple, the calm beneath persists. As it flows, the river carves, not with force but with time. It does not break mountains, it wears them down. It does not tear through stone, it smooths it slowly, gently, year after year. This shaping is its way of remembering. Every bend it creates, every cliff it softens, every pebble it turns smooth as glass. These are not accidents. They are the glacier's breath continued in motion. The river is not a separate being. It is the glacier's voice in water form, reshaping the world with the same patience that once built the ice. Along its path life gathers. Deer come to drink. Willows lean and close. Tiny insects skate its surface while fish glide below. The river gives without asking, nourishes without question. And all the while it changes, splits, joins, slows, races, but it never stops. It was born to move, to carry, to connect. And what it carries is more than just water. It holds sediment, fine glacial flour made of crushed rock, once part of towering cliffs, now suspended in flow. This sediment travels downstream, feeding distant lands with minerals that spark growth, making soil rich, giving fields their color and life. Farmers planting in floodplains may never see the glacier, but their crops feel its gift. Towns built beside wide bends of water benefit from its legacy, cooling in summer, feeding wells, shaping trade and culture. And still, at the heart of this river, there is a silence, not emptiness, presence. The quiet knowing that all this movement began in stillness, that every leaf floating by is part of a longer journey, started in the dark beneath ancient ice. As the river moves, it remembers not just the land but the sky. Rain joins it, snowmelt renews it, clouds reflect in it. The cycle turns, water rises as mist, returns as storm, falls as snow upon the glacier again. This is not a straight line but a spiral, a circling of memory. The glacier becomes river, river becomes rain, rain becomes snow, and the story continues. The silence is never truly broken. It is just passed along, transformed. In some places, these rivers enter deep gorges, places where sound is amplified, where echoes bounce off stone. Here, the river may seem loud, even wild. But still, beneath the crash of rapids, there is a deeper rhythm, that slow, glacial pace, remembered in how the water bends around rock instead of breaking it. That's the legacy of being born in silence. Even when power is required, gentleness remains. The river teaches us how to be strong without shouting. In other places, the river slows again, widens into calm pools, oxbows, meanders. Birds settle here. Reeds wave in slow wind. Reflections stretch across the surface, and it becomes hard to tell where water ends and sky begins. These moments are the river's rest, the stillness it returns to even in motion. It remembers the cold womb of ice, the softness of beginning. It allows itself to pause, to hold, to mirror. And yet the journey never stops. The river is not meant to be still forever. It moves towards something larger, a confluence, a lake, an ocean. It moves because that is its nature, and in moving it gives. It gives shape to the land. It gives life to the roots. It gives memory to those who watch it pass. People build beside rivers not just for need, but for comfort. There is something in the flow that quiets us, reminds us that everything moves: grief, joy, seasons, time. And all movement has a source, even if we never see it. That source, the glacier, may be gone by the time the river reaches the sea. Melted, retreated, remembered only in records and photographs. But its influence is there in every drop. The river does not weep for the glacier. It honors it. It carries its silence forward into the mouths of deltas, into the arms of oceans. The glacier's voice becomes the river's song, and that song is endless. So as we walk beside rivers, let us remember their origin. Let us see beyond the shimmer, beyond the current, into the quiet beginning. Let us feel the cold breath of memory that flows still beneath their warmth. For rivers born in silence do not forget, they simply continue. And in their movement, they carry the story forward for all of us. Now the river nears its end, though it does not know it. To the water there is no final destination, only continuation. The shapes change, the speed varies, the banks shift, but the motion remains. What began in silence beneath the ice now moves with confidence, no longer a whisper but a voice shaped by distance and time. Yet even here, near its broad mouth, the river still carries within it the hush of its beginning. The memory of being born in stillness lingers like a soft undertone, barely heard but always felt. As it widens, the river becomes more than a path. It becomes a place, a living presence that touches everything nearby. Entire ecosystems flourish in its shallows. Trees lean toward it, feeding their roots with its story. Birds trace its currents as if following ancient maps. Fish swim upstream in rhythms older than memory. And as the river nears its confluence with greater waters, it gives more than it takes. It surrenders itself without resistance, becoming part of something larger, an ocean, a bay, a sea. The glaciers melt, once trapped and silent, now moves with the tides, global and vast. This merging is not a loss. It is a transformation. The river does not vanish into the sea, it becomes the sea. Its minerals, its sediments, its cool breath all blend into the great body of salt and motion. What was once glacier, then stream, then river, is now cloud, rain, current, life. In this way, the river fulfills its purpose not by staying, but by moving, by changing, by continuing. And in its final surrender, it offers us the most profound lesson of all, that beginnings do not end, they evolve. People standing at river mouths often speak of peace. There is something calming about the vast horizon, the slow rhythm of waves meeting fresh water. It's a place of release where motion softens and reflection deepens. Here, the river pauses not in flow but in meaning. It has traveled far, shaped worlds, given life. And now it dissolves into something greater, unseen but unbroken. This moment is quiet, like the silence beneath the glacier. The circle closes. Yet even in the ocean, the glacier's memory endures. The minerals it carried feed plankton that bloom and drift. The temperature of its waters shifts currents that shape climate. The sediment settles, layering on the ocean floor another archive, another memory being formed. And in time, that water will rise again, evaporated into cloud, destined to fall once more on snowy peaks. The glacier will live again. Maybe not as it was, but in the rhythm it helped sustain. The silence will return. The river will begin again. We do not always see these patterns. From our perspective, the river ends. But nature does not end, it recycles. What moves in one form returns in another. The same water that trickled beneath ancient ice now rests in a teacup, or a tree, or a tear. The same silence that nurtured a hidden stream now lives in the hush of early morning fog. The river teaches us this, that all things flow, that all things connect, that all things return. And we, too, are part of this story. The rivers shape not only land but memory. We remember childhood spent on their banks, the songs they inspired, the bridges built across them. We measure time by their flood and their drought. We feel comfort in their steady presence, in the way they reflect the sky without ever holding it. They are more than geography. They are emotion, ritual, continuity. When a river dries, we do not forget it. When a glacier melts, its story is not erased. The silence that began beneath the ice lives on in the river's path, in the soil it touched, in the voices of those who listened closely enough to hear it. That silence, born deep within the glacier, now hums within us. We carry it, even if we don't know its name. And so we return to where we started, at the edge of stillness, listening for the first sound of flow. Now, however, we know more. We've followed the water from its silent birth to its open ending. We've seen how motion grows from quiet, how strength grows from patience, how memory moves through every drop. The river's story is the glacier's story, and the glacier's story is ours. Because in every ending there is the beginning of something else, and every river born in silence eventually finds its way home. There are places in the world where snow once fell in silence, thick and soft, coating the ground in a kind of hush that wrapped everything in stillness. But there are also places now where snow no longer comes. Valleys that once glittered white through long winters now remain bare, their silence unbroken but not peaceful. This is the story of a snow that never came. Not because it was late, but because it was lost. A snow that waited in the clouds and found no place to fall. A snow that held the memory of winter in its flake, a memory that was never written, never touched the ground, never melted into water. The last snow that never fell is not a storm, it is an absence. And in that absence, there is a quiet sadness. We often think of snow as fleeting. It comes and goes, it falls, then melts. But snow is more than momentary beauty. It is a message. Each flake carries within it the temperature of the sky, the moisture of the sea, the path of the wind. Each flake begins as vapor, invisible, weightless, then gathers into form, shaped by pressure and cold. It spirals downward, often alone, sometimes as part of a flurry, always silent. When it reaches the earth, it becomes part of something larger, a drift, a layer, a glacier. And in that joining, the memory becomes part of the land. But in places where the last snow never fell, that memory remains suspended. The air held it, but the ground never received it. These are the moments that do not finish. The stories that begin but never touch paper. The clouds that gathered heavy with potential only to vanish in warmth. No flake, no hush, just sky unburdened and empty. And beneath it, a land that once expected snow now lies bare, remembering what it used to feel like to be touched by winter. In the high mountains and the cold plains, these absences are growing. Glaciers once fed by steady snowfall are now starved. Ice that should be nourished by winter's breath thins instead. Rivers fed by melt begin earlier, run lower, dry sooner. Forests that relied on snowmelt grow thirsty. Animals shift their patterns, their births, their migrations. The timing is off. The rhythm falters. All because the snow never came. And yet the snow that never fell still leaves a trace. Not on the ground, but in the data. Scientists measure the moisture in the air, the pressure systems that stalled, the warming currents that disrupted the storm. The snow existed, it just never completed its journey. It is strange to think of something being real and present, yet never arriving. But that is the nature of change. Not everything vanishes in violence. Some things are simply interrupted, softened into non-existence, like a word spoken under breath. Still the land remembers. Soil that once absorbed snows melt now cracks in the absence of water. Stones lie uncovered, warmed too early. Plants bloom before they should, only to be caught by a late frost. Even the silence changes. It is no longer the deep, peaceful hush of snow-covered fields. It is a thinner, sharper stillness, like something missing from the air itself. Those who live in these places notice first. Elders speak of snows that used to arrive without fail, of first flakes landing in the palms of children, of roofs bending under the weight of memory. Now they look to the sky and see only clouds that pass without pause. They wait, and the waiting becomes its own kind of grief, soft, quiet, and lingering. The kind of grief that settles in the bones, like cold that never quite touches the skin. But this story is not only sorrow, it is reflection. Because in the absence of snow, we begin to ask deeper questions. What else have we forgotten to hold sacred? What other rhythms have we disrupted without noticing? What else waits above us, ready to fall, only to vanish before it arrives? The snow that never fell becomes a symbol of change, of fragility, of the unseen moments that shape our world. And in that symbol is a quiet power, because what never fell might still return. What was lost might still be remembered. The sky is not empty forever. Seasons turn, winds shift, and sometimes in places long untouched, snow does return. The first flakes come gently, hesitantly, like a memory trying to find its way home. And when they do, they are not just snow, they are hope made visible. Let us drift into the space where that last snow might have fallen, if only the air had been just a little colder, if only the sky had held on a little longer. It is not an empty place. The ground is there, waiting. The trees still reach upward. The winds still move across the valleys. But there is something missing, not easily seen, yet clearly felt. The earth beneath remembers what it once held. The sound of snowfall is not loud, yet its absence echoes. In many regions, the snowline is creeping higher, retreating up the slopes as warmth pushes winter further away. Hills once blanketed in white now hold only frost for a few weeks, if at all. The snowfall comes later and leaves sooner, and the layers do not build the way they used to. Instead of stacking gently into drifts, snow melts between storms. It is interrupted, fragmented, denied the chance to become part of something lasting. What would have formed a glacier becomes a trickle. What would have lingered in spring disappears before winter even ends. The season itself feels thinner, like a curtain pulled too tightly across a window. And within that thinning, the cold loses its power to carry memory. Snow, after all, is not just decoration. It is the start of a record. Each layer adds to the next. Weight compresses it, forming firn, then ice, a transformation that holds the fingerprint of each year. But when snow does not fall, the record stops. There is a blank space where time should have been kept, a silence not of peace but of omission. The glacier cannot grow if there is nothing to feed it. The memory cannot deepen if there is nothing to hold. This unrecorded space is more than a metaphor. It is a reality felt in the melt curves of glaciers that recede with no replenishment, in the permafrost that thaws not from surface heat, but from the loss of insulating snow. In rivers that run dry by midsummer, their sources never fully restored. The absence of snow leaves everything more vulnerable, more exposed, more brittle. Where once there was a steady pulse of winter, now there is hesitation, a faltering step in the cycle. In some places, what snow remains comes not gently but in sudden heavy bursts. Storms arrive unbalanced, dropping too much too quickly, overwhelming the ground, then vanishing in warmth. This is not the slow, poetic snow of old, the kind that layered itself over the world like a quiet story. It is hurried, unsteady, and unsure. The sky, it seems, has forgotten how to whisper. And yet the snow that never fell still shapes the land through its absence alone. Trees bloom too early, streams swell too fast, animals search for cues that never arrive. The timing is off in every direction. And all of it traces back to a flake that never formed, a cloud that never cooled, a whisper that never found its voice. The world without that snow shifts in small, invisible ways, and those small shifts become something larger, a new rhythm, unfamiliar, dissonant. But memory is not easily erased. Even when the snow does not fall, we remember how it felt. We remember walking through its hush, seeing the light reflect off its surface, hearing its soft crunch beneath our feet. These sensory echoes linger in us, even when the real thing does not return. In stories told by firesides, in drawings etched by children, in songs written for winters that used to be, the snow continues, imagined, yearned for, mourned. Artists paint it even if they haven't seen it in years. Writers describe it as if it still falls outside their windows. Filmmakers add it to scenes to stir something deep inside us, a collective memory of purity, silence, and peace. The snow becomes a symbol of what was, and of what we still hope could be. The snow that never fell inspires not only sorrow, but a kind of love, a quiet reverence for something fragile, something earned. Communities that once depended on seasonal snowfall are adapting, but they are not forgetting. Reservoirs are redesigned, crops are shifted, traditions are altered to fit new timelines. But always, someone speaks of the years when the first snow arrived like clockwork on a certain date under a certain moon. Those memories live on like flickering candles in a growing dusk, soft and warm, even as the cold withdraws. And through it all, the skis remain, watching, holding, carrying the same moisture, the same potential. The snow that never fell is not gone forever. It waits, as snow always has, for the right conditions, for the cold to return, for the world to pause, to hold still long enough for memory to settle again. And when it does, if it does, the first flake that finally falls will not just be snow. It will be the closing of a long, silent sentence, a note held for years, finally released. Now let us imagine that flake, the one that almost fell, the one that waited just above the surface of the world. It drifts within a cloud heavy with potential, shaped by ice crystals clinging to one another in fractal silence. The air is just on the edge of cold enough, the sky just still enough, the moment just possible. And then, after years of absence, after seasons of empty waiting, it begins to fall, slowly, without sound. The sky releases what it has held for so long. The first flake touches the ground like a memory returning to its home. Then another, and another. They are not loud, not hurried, not many, but they are there. And their presence changes everything. The bare earth, once resigned to another warm winter, pauses. Trees that had braced against early warmth now stand still, catching snow on branches like lost letters from a forgotten friend. The silence deepens, not from absence, but from return. The world holds its breath. In the beginning, this snow does not stay. It melts quickly, sinking into the ground, vanishing as if it had never arrived. But the second snow lingers longer. The third begins to layer. And with each fall, the land relearns what it means to hold winter. The snow becomes a blanket once more, not only of cold but of memory. Each layer softens the sounds of the world, hushes the wind, draws the animals into their rhythms. Footprints return to paths that once had none. Children run outside with eyes wide in wonder, reaching out for flakes they thought they would never see again. The glacier, too, responds. Where its surface had melted unevenly, fresh snow begins to cover its wounds. It is not enough to rebuild what has been lost, but it is enough to remind the ice that it is still part of the cycle. A soft seal over ancient cracks, a whisper of hope in a language the glacier understands. And in the high places where only the wind walks, snow begins to stack again. Thin at first, then thicker. A layer of new memory forming, quiet and slow, the way all true remembering begins. Even if the snow does not stay, even if the season shifts again too soon, that small return marks something real. It is not just meteorology. It is meaning. A sign that the balance may not be gone, only wounded. That with care, with time, with listening, it might be restored. The snow that once never fell has at last arrived. And though it came late, though it came hesitantly, it came with grace. The land accepts it without question. The sky seems lighter for having let it go. In human hearts, something softens too. There is a quiet sense of healing that comes with watching snow fall, not in blizzards or storms, but in gentle flurries. It reminds us of slowness, of patience, of cycles larger than ourselves. It teaches us how to wait, how to trust that even the long-forgotten can find their way back, that even what was lost can fall again gently upon the shoulders of the world. And so the story closes not with loss but with return. The snow that never fell has become the snow that did. The silence that once spoke of absence now holds presence. The blank pages of winter are written upon once more, each flake a word, each drift a sentence. It may not last forever, it may melt with the morning sun, but it was here, and it was enough. The earth remembers, the sky forgives, and between them snow falls light as breath, old as time, soft as memory. It falls not with urgency, not with triumph, but with understanding. And in that falling, the world is whole again. There is a kind of silence that doesn't simply quiet the world, it listens. Deep beneath the surface of ancient glaciers, beyond the reach of sun and sound, there are echoes not of voices, but of everything that has ever passed through this earth. These echoes are not heard the way we hear thunder or song. They are felt. They are written into the very fabric of ice, in the way layers stack, in the way pressure shifts, in the way air is held captive in crystalline chambers. Every snowflake that landed in some forgotten winter did not vanish. It was folded into the body of the glacier, pressed into memory. It carries with it the voice of its time, the winds that brought it, the skis it fell through, the light it reflected. These things do not disappear. They sleep, and in their sleep they echo. When scientists drill deep into glacial cores, they are not just extracting frozen water, they are pulling up layers of time. Thousands upon thousands of years sit coiled in these columns of ice, layer after delicate layer. Each one is a fingerprint of a world that once was. Some carry traces of ancient forest fires, their black soot streaking the white in thin shadows. Others hold ash from volcanoes that reshaped continents. Still others bear the quiet signature of life, spores from plants that no longer grow, air from a sky not breathed by any living thing in millennia. It is here, in the stillest corners of the world, that Earth keeps its most honest diary, not written with words but with silence, with accumulation, with time. But it is not only the Earth that speaks. Hidden within the ice are echoes of our own kind. Ancient travelers wrapped in fur, frozen mid-stride, their tools still beside them, their bodies preserved in unimaginable stillness. Not statues, not fossils, people, caught in the act of crossing into the unknown. Their presence is not loud, not grand, but it is there. An imprint of a foot, a strand of hair, the quiet story of someone who once moved through this place believing it would stay the same forever. The ice became their shelter, their tomb, their storyteller. And all around them the glacier moved. Slowly but surely it carried forward, not to erase them but to hold them in waiting. Every crack in the ice became a pause in a sentence, every trapped bubble of air, a whisper from a time before ours. And now, as the glaciers melt, those whispers are rising, not with fanfare but with gentle insistence. The ice gives way to time. The echoes escape. And we, who thought we understood the world, are left listening to a language that moves through water and cold and memory. These echoes change us. They make us realize how brief our moment is, how thin the line is between now and then. A glacier might appear eternal, but even it has a beginning. Even it remembers when it was just snow falling in a meadow. And now it holds entire centuries inside it, not with pride, but with quiet grace. The glacier does not boast of its knowledge. It simply exists, bearing the weight of time with a stillness that humbles. To stand at the edge of such a glacier is to feel the presence of 1,000 unspoken things. The air feels older. The wind carries more than chill, it carries questions. What was the world like when this ice was new? What voices filled the forests then? What hands planted seeds that would never sprout again? These questions drift like snowflakes themselves, small and numerous and melting the moment you try to grasp them. But in their melting, they nourish something deeper, a reverence for what endures. So we listen, not with our ears but with our patience. We walk alongside melting ice and see what it reveals, an ancient piece of wood, a frozen butterfly, a path no longer walked. And we do not rush to understand. We allow the glacier to speak in its own rhythm, knowing that truth held in silence is no less true. that sometimes the deepest echoes do not come from sound but from stillness, from the slow, relentless unfolding of ice into memory. Let us descend deeper now into the glacier's inner body, where the weight of the world presses silence into form. This is where echoes turn into layers, where time thickens, slows, and settles into walls of pale blue. Each layer tells of a year, each year tells of a season, and within those seasons are stories so soft they might have disappeared had the ice not kept them. These stories are not told with ink or voice. They are told with dust, with pressure, with the faintest shifts in chemical composition. In every meter of ice, entire lifetimes are quietly preserved, lifetimes we have never seen, but which still shape the air we breathe, the weather we live beneath. What's remarkable is not just what is preserved, but how. The glacier does not catalog like a human mind, does not choose what to remember. It accepts everything. The gentle fall of ash after a distant eruption, the invisible plume of pollution rising from a forest burned in prehistory, the dance of wind-borne pollen, the trace of a faraway sea carried on the back of a storm. It takes all of this and presses it into its being, not to judge or display, but simply to hold. The ice has no agenda. It is memory without motive, the most honest kind. And yet in holding so much, the glacier becomes more than frozen water. It becomes testimony. It is a witness to everything that has come before, to changes in the Earth's tilt, to the rise and fall of warmth, to the breath of ancient forests and the stillness of frozen nights. Some layers speak of abundance, thick snowfalls, long winters, rich skis. Others speak of scarcity, dry years, sudden thaws, strange warmths. But even these contradictions are remembered equally. The glacier does not forget the hard years. It carries them just as carefully as the easy ones. This way the glacier becomes a mirror, not only of climate but of our own ways of remembering. How we too carry layers inside us, soft seasons of joy, sharp winters of loss, quiet springs we never fully noticed. How our memories settle in folds and textures, not always clear but always there. And just as we sometimes forget until something stirs us, a scent, a song, a certain shade of light, the glacier too remains quiet until touched, until melted, until examined with care. Scientists, when they extract ice cores, often speak in hushed tones about what they find, not because they fear damage, but because there is something sacred in the moment. Holding a piece of ice that has not felt air in 10,000 years is not just science, it's communion. It's breathing in the same air that once circled through an untouched world, hearing the past not through words but through presence. Some even describe hearing faint pops, tiny sounds as the ancient air escapes, the glacier's last breath from a forgotten age. What the glacier offers is not always comfortable. Its echoes include catastrophe, abrupt climate shifts, collapses of ecosystems, long droughts, mysterious extinctions. But even these are not warnings shouted from mountaintops. They are gentle nudges, patient reminders. The glacier says, I have seen this before, I have survived, but not everything does. It does not accuse, it invites us to understand. And as the ice retreats, as it must, more echoes are released. Some come in the form of ancient microbes, stirring after being frozen for millennia. Others come as preserved remains, fur still soft, skin still marked, tools still bearing the imprint of the hand that shaped them. These are not artifacts of war or conquest. They are moments, a person walking, a hunter waiting, a child wrapped in warmth. The glacier did not preserve power, it preserved presence. In a world where everything moves fast, where news vanishes in moments and images blur into noise, the glacier offers another way, a slow, enduring way, a way that says, this happened, this mattered, this is still here. The echo it carries is not one of loudness but of depth, a depth we rarely encounter in daily life, a depth that reminds us how shallow most of our rushing is. And yet for all its age, for all its weight, the glacier is tender. It melts not in rage but in response. It lets go of what it has held when the world grows too warm to hold it. And in that release, it offers us one last chance to listen, to pay attention not only to what it tells us about the past, but to what it reflects about our future. So we walk beside these melting edges, not as conquerors or saviors, but as students. We place our hands on walls of ice, feeling the quiet breath of centuries drift into the sun. We close our eyes and we listen, not for words but for echoes, for the small truths that live in stillness, in memory, in the long, slow song of the glacier's heart. Now the glacier begins to let go, not with thunder or violence, but with a gentleness so immense it feels like a breath exhaled after centuries of holding it in. The ice, once locked and layered with echoes, begins to melt at its edges. Drip by drip, the past becomes the present. The snowflakes that fell before the birth of cities, before the rise of languages, before memory had names, now slip silently into streams. They do not announce themselves. They do not demand attention. They simply become water, water that moves forward, carrying with it all that the glacier once kept still. This water flows downhill, joining rivers that wind through valleys where no glacier now remains. It nourishes the soil, cools the stones, feeds roots of trees whose ancestors never knew snow. But in its movement the echo of the glacier lingers, a mineral fingerprint, a temperature, a pattern of purity. The water may look like any other, but those who know, who truly watch, understand that it carries something more. It carries silence. It carries the weight of what it used to be. As the glacier thins, as more air escapes, the past begins to fade into the atmosphere. Those ancient bubbles held in place for tens of thousands of years now mix with the breath of the present. Somewhere, a person inhales a molecule once touched by the winds of a forest that no longer exists. Somewhere else, a droplet from a melted core falls into a cup, swirls in tea, and is swallowed, its memory unknowingly absorbed. In this way, the glacier becomes part of everything. Its story is no longer isolated. It is scattered in lungs, in rivers, in clouds. But this scattering is not loss. It is transformation. Just as the glacier once gathered snowflake after snowflake, each one a moment, a whisper, now its story is released flake by flake, drop by drop. The ice dissolves, but its meaning expands. It no longer belongs to one mountaintop, one continent, one age. It belongs to us all. The echo it carried is now a song we continue to sing, even if we do not know the words. In some regions, the retreating glacier reveals land not seen in millennia. Beneath the ice, moss begins to grow. Flowers find light. Insects return to stones still slick from melt. It is not a rebirth exactly, more a remembering, a land reacquainting itself with sunlight. And with each season, the echo of the glacier takes on new forms. A patch of green where there was once white. A new stream where once there was silence. Life, adapting to absence but not forgetting presence. For those who return year after year to these places, the change is visible but never abrupt. A cliff that was once rimmed with ice now stands bare. A lake fed by melt now stretches wider. The sound of cracking ice is replaced by the murmuring of water. But even in this shift, the glacier's memory endures. The way the rock has been polished smooth. The grooves carved into hillsides. The hush that still settles when the wind stops. The land does not forget what held it for so long. And neither should we, because the glacier's echo is more than geological. It is emotional. It speaks to something within us that also moves slowly, holds deeply, and lets go reluctantly. We too carry layers of experience, of memory, of silence. And just like the glacier, we reveal those layers only when the world warms enough to see them. In that warming is vulnerability, yes, but also beauty. To melt is not only to lose, it is to open. So we must listen while there is still time. Walk gently across moraines still damp from ice. Stand quietly at the edge of a melt pool and watch the ripples as they drift outward, carrying history with them. Press your hand to the cold and know that it is touching more than temperature. It is touching the breath of a world that was, and the soft pulse of a world that still is. And as the last layers vanish, as the glacier's voice grows fainter, we do not say goodbye. We say thank you. Thank you for holding what we could not, for remembering when we forgot, for showing us how to bear weight with stillness, for reminding us that even in retreat there can be grace. The echoes trapped in ice are no longer trapped. They are moving now through rivers, through rain, through us. And as long as we carry them gently, they will not fade. They will evolve. They will continue. They will find new places to rest, new forms to take. Because memory, like water, never truly disappears. It only changes shape. There are shadows that stretch across the land long after the object that cast them is gone. They remain in the curve of valleys, in the tilt of stone, in the silence between the trees. One of the longest shadows on earth is cast not by mountain or monument, but by something that moves so slowly it feels still, a glacier. Long after the ice has melted, the glacier's shadow lingers. Not a shadow of darkness, but of shape, of memory, of quiet force. It is imprinted in the land like a sigh left behind, long and low, almost forgotten. And yet it defines everything that follows. To walk through a valley once carved by ice is to walk through time. You may not see the glacier now, but its signature is everywhere. The walls of the valley are smooth, not jagged. The floor is wide and flat, not narrow like a river's cut. Boulders sit in fields where no cliff hovers above them, dropped like punctuation by a retreating tongue of ice. The soil is strangely rich, ground fine by millennia of pressure and motion. Even the lakes, quiet and still, owe their existence to what once dragged through these places, groaning and creaking and slowly sculpting a new world. And the glacier did not shape the land alone. It carried with it everything in its path: rocks, trees, entire hillsides. These were not stolen. They were woven into the ice, held within its slow churn like memories trapped in dreams. Some were buried and lost. Others were set down gently as the glacier pulled back, left as reminders, as anchors, as silent storytellers. A stone in a field may look ordinary, but it might have traveled for centuries under the belly of a glacier, pressed smooth by weight and motion, kissed by cold that reached deeper than frost. Even today, where glaciers have long vanished, their shadow guides the water. Rivers follow the low paths left behind. Wetlands form in old depressions. Forests bloom in the fertile soil of glacial outwash. The echo of ice shapes what grows, what survives, what struggles. A forest might appear wild and untamed, but its very location was determined by a cold hand that passed over the land 10,000 years ago. The trees grow in the glacier's footprint, whether they know it or not. But the glacier's shadow is not only physical. It lives in culture, in myth, in memory. People who live in lands once dominated by ice still speak of its presence. Their stories include spirits of the cold, mountains that move, rivers that speak. Their calendars remember when the snow first came, when it melted, when the ice groaned in the night. Even when the glacier retreats, it leaves behind a rhythm. The people follow it, consciously or not, in the planting of crops, in the migration of animals, in the rituals passed down through generations. The animals, too, follow that shadow. Herds move along paths once cleared by ice. Birds nest in cliffs carved smooth by its pressure. Fish spawn in streams fed by the glacier's meltwater, generations later, long after the melt has become rain. The glacier's touch lingers in bones and instincts. It has shaped not only the land, but the habits of those who live upon it. And yet, for all its strength, the glacier's presence is quiet. It does not shout its history. It does not demand recognition. It simply is. And when it retreats, it does so with dignity, leaving behind not ruin but form. The land adjusts. The water finds new paths. Life slowly returns. But always underneath the new growth, the shape of the glacier remains, a silent outline drawn in earth and memory. To see a glacier now is to see the last pages of a story still being written. It is to witness a shadow being cast in real time, to watch the weight of ice press itself into stone and then withdraw, leaving a perfect mold. We may not see what comes next, but the land will remember. The glacier's shadow will persist, even when the glacier is gone. And maybe that is what legacy truly is: not presence but influence, not permanence but imprint. The glacier does not need to remain in order to shape the future. It has already done so. Every drop that melts now flows into rivers that sustain. Every groove carved in the rock guides the step of someone walking generations later. Every shadow it casts remains, long after the light has moved on. Let us step deeper into the glacier's shadow, not as something behind us, but as something beneath us. For even when the ice has vanished, the weight it carried remains pressed into the land. This is not metaphor. The Earth itself remembers. Beneath every former glacier lies a subtle sag, a dent in the planet's crust, so slow to rise that it continues shifting centuries after the ice has gone. Scientists call it isostatic rebound, but to the land it is simply memory, a memory of weight, a memory of stillness, a long-held pressure being gradually released. In this way, the glacier continues to shape the present. Lakes form where the crust has yet to lift. Hills rise slowly, lifting stones like thoughts resurfacing. Rivers deepen their beds, tracing old ice-scoured lines. Even earthquakes whisper beneath places where glaciers once pressed down. The earth is not static. It is always responding. The glacier may be absent, but its presence still rearranges everything around it. And it is not only the ground that changes. The air does too. Regions once cooled by glacial breezes now warm more quickly. The wind, without ice to direct its path, finds new routes. Weather patterns shift. Snow that once fell like clockwork now arrives uncertain, scattered, hesitant. The glacier's shadow stretches into the sky, where clouds now drift through warmer air and rains fall instead of snow. Even the seasons feel it. Spring comes earlier, winter shorter. The rhythm that glaciers once enforced, a slow, powerful cadence, begins to soften, like a drumbeat fading in distance. But in the silence that follows, something remarkable happens. The land does not return to what it was before the glacier. It cannot. Too much has changed. Instead, it becomes something new, shaped not only by the ice but by its absence. Valleys carved by glaciers become corridors of life. The bare rock left behind becomes a canvas. Lichen finds it first, painting gray with green, then moss, then flowers, then roots that grip the cracks left by the retreating ice. It's not rebirth, it's inheritance. We see this in the fjords of Norway, where the sea now floods deep cuts made by glacial tongues. We see it in the American Midwest, where the flat plains are dotted with kettle lakes, all remnants of buried and melting ice. We see it in the Himalayas, where once thick glaciers now leave behind scree and silence, and yet still send meltwater into rivers that nourish millions. Each place carries the echo of the glacier's shape, not in ice, but in form, in function, in flow. Animals, too, evolve within this shadow. Species that once clung to the glacier's edge must now adapt or move. Some find new niches in the tundra exposed by melt. Others follow the retreat, chasing cold upward into shrinking altitudes. New relationships form between predator and prey, plant and pollinator, river and fish, all within a geography newly written by melting. The glacier's absence becomes its legacy, as life reshapes itself around what the ice once was. Humans walk these reshaped paths every day, often unaware. Highways follow old glacial valleys. Cities sit in basins carved by retreat. Farms thrive in soil ground fine by glaciers into the perfect texture for planting. Even the stories we tell of gods in the mountains, of beasts frozen in time, of lands that sleep and wake, all stem from the glacier's deep, slow presence. Our languages reflect the ice. Our myths echo its motion. The shadow falls not just on stone, but on memory. And yet shadows are not always ominous. They are reminders. They show us where the light was. They define shape. The glacier's shadow is long, yes, but it is generous. It has left us with more than cold. It has left us with form, with beauty, with understanding. It has taught us the value of slow change, of deep memory, of patience pressed into matter. And as we walk its paths, we carry that lesson forward, often without knowing it. In some places, people return to these landscapes and rebuild connections with the ice that once ruled them. They map the old margins. They track the melt. They listen to the ground for signs of rising. They study the ice not to preserve it forever, but to understand what it meant and what it still means. Because even in its retreat, the glacier speaks. It speaks through the rocks it smoothed, the lakes it left behind, the way sunlight falls just right on the face of a U-shaped valley. The glacier's shadow is not absence. It is structure, a framework upon which new stories grow. And as long as we continue to notice it, to follow it, to respect the space it shaped, the glacier will never fully be gone. It will live on in the contours of the land, in the rhythms of rivers, in the rise and fall of hills that still remember the weight they once bore. The final trace of the glacier's shadow lives not in stone or soil, but in the imagination. For even when the last patch of ice has melted and the valleys have warmed and the rivers have forgotten the taste of glacial melt, we will still remember. The idea of the glacier, vast, silent, patient, settles into us like sediment. It becomes a metaphor, a lens through which we see time differently. Not as a straight line, but as a series of slow returns. Not as a rush forward, but as a gentle unfolding. The glacier teaches us to measure in centuries, not seasons. To understand that what moves slowly is not lost, it is simply becoming something deeper. This kind of memory is not loud. It doesn't cry out to be preserved. It doesn't insist on being honored. It just waits. In old photographs of vanished ice fields, in maps with blue lines that no longer match reality, in the quiet of hikers who reach a once glacial pass and find only grass, the glacier's absence becomes presence, a kind of quiet awareness, a knowing. You look at the mountain and you see what is no longer there, and in doing so you see more. The shape of the glacier lingers in human memory just as it lingers in the land. It influences our stories, yes, but also our sense of scale, our ability to imagine a world before us and a world beyond us, to see the earth not as fixed but as fluid, to understand that something can shape everything and still disappear. The glacier does not vanish like fire, consuming as it goes. It vanishes like breath fading, leaving only a trace of warmth, a change in the air. Even now, as the planet warms, as the glaciers shrink, their shadow grows longer in another way. We speak of them more. We photograph them, we study their melt, we compare new images to old ones with growing sorrow. And yet in this attention there is also reverence. We are learning to see what we once ignored, to recognize the importance of what was always too slow, too quiet to demand our notice. We begin to understand the value of things that endure or tried to. But the glacier has never been just about ice. It has always been about time, about patience, about the way the world remembers without speaking, about how change can be gentle and still absolute. It has shown us that permanence is not the same as presence, that something can be gone and still shape everything that remains. And perhaps most quietly of all, it has shown us that beauty doesn't need to shout. Sometimes it is the softest force, a shadow, a breath, a drip, that carves the deepest lines. In the years to come, more glaciers will retreat. Some will vanish entirely. But their stories are not lost. They are carried in the rocks, in the rivers, in the stories we pass down, and in the way we walk across the land. When we notice a valley that curves too smoothly, a rock too round to belong, a stream that glows with a certain clarity, we are remembering. We are tracing the glacier's path with our own footsteps. We are walking not just on earth, but through memory. And the glacier's memory is generous. It leaves behind what we need to continue, not only water, not only fertile ground, but understanding, a way of seeing, a way of slowing down, a way of listening. It tells us, look closely, be patient. What seems still is always moving. What seems gone is never truly lost. And what shapes us most is often what we can't hold on to. So as the last gleams of ice fade into cloud and the last glacial pools drain into the sea, we do not weep only for what is ending. We breathe in what remains, the space, the story, the shape, and we carry that forward into our cities, our futures, our dreams. Because though the glacier may vanish, its shadow will always fall across the way we understand the world. And in that shadow there is still light, a softer light, a wiser light, a light that shows us the contours of what was and what still echoes beneath our every step.